Zach's Garage. I'm Zach, and this is my 1986 AMC Eagle station wagon. This is a limited, so it's got power seats, power windows. This is a car that AMC made from 1980 to 1988. It had various different models, the wagon being the most plentiful. I'm getting ready to start a big project on this car, and thought it'd be a great opportunity for me to start taking some videos of some of the stuff I do here in the shop. Mostly for myself to look back on and remember how I put this car together. So if I decide to change anything, or if I'm curious of what I used where, if part numbers get rubbed off or things get broken. The plan for this series is to go over a 3-link suspension straight axle swap that I'm going to be doing on the front of this car. Now, I'm not cutting up a good car. This car is actually fairly rusty. The driver's side front frame section, this is a unibody car. And where they made the front frame sections, they used stamped steel, so it's not solid, and unfortunately it's been rusted for the last almost 30 years, right? 86, 96, 06, 16, oh wow, more than 30 years, okay. So like 36 years it's been out and about. It hasn't been in snow and salt since I've owned it for the last 6, but the first 30 years of its life it was used for everything. I think it was actually used by a mail carrier, so it's definitely had a hard time. This fender I replaced because it had a huge cave-in right here on it from where she had hit a pole or something, I'm not really sure. The back hatch had a big cave-in where they had hit something. If you look, you can see I've got a big dent here, and the rockers are just, they're not good. So we're not cutting up a Survivor car or an all-original 80,000 mile car. This car has 156,000 miles on it right now. And like I said, the frame section is pretty much rusted out of it. So it's time to fix that. And the plan for this car, as you can tell by the tent and the canopy, is it's going to be for overland use with my family. And unfortunately, the independent front suspension on this car is as high as it can go. And these are 27-inch tires, and we just don't have a ton of clearance here. We do have V8 Matador springs on the upper control arms that brought it up 2 inches. I added a leaf from a Jeep Cherokee into the rear to bring the rear up a little bit. I have just rebuilt the entire front end on this car. It's got new upper and lower ball joints being really hard to find. It's got new CV axle shafts in it. This side has a busted boot. It's got new wheel bearings in it. The wheel bearings are actually from a 1989 Jeep Cherokee. I was able to have the knuckles machined by a friend of mine for those to fit because my bearing carriers were bad from the previous owner letting them get all wallered out in there, and nothing I could do could fix it. So we actually machined those out to take an 89 Jeep Cherokee bearing, and it's got new bearings in it. As a result, I just rebushed the upper and lower control arms in it, all new steering, inner and outer tie rods, steering, stabilizer, sway bar end links, you name it, it's new. We've since put about 4,000 miles on the car. It's running good, it's driving good, it's had its fair share of little kinks that I've had to work out along the way. But overall, this build has been really successful, and we're just taking it to that next step. Sorry about that, battery died. Where were we? So like I said, we're going to do a straight axle swap on the front end. It's going to have a 3-link that I ordered from Barnes 4-wheel drive. They make some pretty good parts. I haven't had experience with them firsthand, but once we get to that point, I'll start looking over them, see what kind of shape they're in. I actually got a do-it-yourself kit, so I'll be welding it all together and doing all the fabrication for this project. Now, I'm not a fabricator. The first thing I've really fabricated for any projects of mine has actually been the roof rack that's on this car. I made it out of 1-inch cold-rolled steel. It's got 3 crossbars on it on the main hoop that are 18-inch separation. It's a 60-inch long roof rack that I needed to put on it so I could get all the storage that I could. Unfortunately, we're on a pretty small vehicle that we're trying to put a lot of stuff in for overlanding trips. So this front axle that we decided to go with, I got a Dana 30 high pinion. I know they're pretty weak, but this isn't going to be a rock crawler. We're not going to be doing any mud pit racing or anything like that in the car. So I'm pretty optimistic that the axle should be able to hold up, especially if we end up putting like a chromoly axle shafts in it, or if we go and start putting some different gearing. The axles that we're putting in are actually 355s. They're factory out of a Jeep Cherokee. I believe that axle is out of a 92. It was either 92 or 94. I can't really remember what the guy told me, but I'm pretty sure he said 92. In the rear, we're going to be running the Chrysler 8 1/4 that came out of that same Jeep. We will probably put a lunchbox style locker in that for now anyways. I would like to go to air lockers in the future, but for now, I'm not sure if we'll even need a locker, not for a little while anyways. Now, while we are doing both of these, we're actually going to go ahead and put the AW4 transmission in it as well. The reason we're going ahead and doing this swap now and beginning this build is because the lockup torque converter in our TF998 transmission is actually slipping. Whenever it starts to engage, if you're mildly into the accelerator, it starts to make a real bad clunking noise and it kind of starts jerking real bad until you let out or you give it more. And then it kind of smooths out and it's pretty fine. But then when you start to go up a grade, if you're down near the torque converter lockup area, it begins to slip again. And I don't want to hurt the car more than what it already is. I'm not going to put money into a transmission I plan on swapping anyways. So we're just going to head and taking the TF998 out of it. We're going to take the factory we're going to take the factory transfer case out of it and replace that with an NP231 that I got from a friend. And it already has the slip yoke eliminator kit in it. And what that is, if you're not familiar, is on the transfer cases from the Cherokees, they have a slip yoke in the torque converter. And a big issue that people have with that is it adds another fail point, makes some vibrations depending on the way you're set up, and it's just not desirable. So we'll have our slip yoke on our drive shaft like normal. And like I said, that already has that kit in it, which is a fairly expensive kit, so we kind of got lucky there. So that is the idea for our drivetrain. That's what we're going to be going with. I'm going to pop the hood and I'll bring you over to take a look at the engine real quick and we'll discuss what that is. So now we've got to look at the engine that I put in this car. This is a 4-liter high output out of a 1995 Jeep Grand Cherokee that I picked up from a friend. It had been sitting out in the field for several years with no protection. So to no surprise, when I tore it apart, it was full of water and mud. It was so bad, I'll try and find the picture. If I do, I'll put it in right here. There was a block of ice in the oil pan that was frozen up to the oil pickup, and I actually had to beat the oil pickup out of the oil pump with a hammer in order to get the oil pan off of the motor. I will also put some pictures in of what the cylinders looked like when I tore those apart. They were full of just a really muddy water, looked like a chocolate milkshake. Now this was a budget build. I had never known anybody that had built a 4.5 liter stroker motor before, and I wasn't sure how this was going to work out. I had most of the parts laying around here for it, and I wanted to keep it as low as possible in case it didn't work out right. So what this is it's a completely stock 4-liter high output, except it has a crankshaft out of a 258, which is a 4.2 liter inline 6 that was originally in this car. It just changes the stroke of the piston as it comes down in the bore. It comes down a little bit lower. So we're running that crank, and we also have the connecting rods out of that engine as well. Everything else is just factory 4-liter equivalents that I ordered online. It was whatever the cheapest kit was that I could get at the time. We did send the head out to get valve seals replaced and to have the head resurfaced in case we were to have any issues in it being true, so that we wouldn't have any blown head gasket issues. This radiator is for a Jeep CJ5 that I made work in this car because there's no reproductions, there's no aftermarket for this car. And the factory copper radiator just was not going to hold up to the kind of heat that we're producing with this engine. We also converted this car to run the electronic fuel injection for the Jeep. You can see I've got a regulator here so that I can knock down the pressure to 39.5, which is what the 95 high output calls for. The injectors we have in this car are actually out of a 7.5 liter Ford, which is a 460 big block. These are just junkyard units. Again, I wasn't sure where this engine was going to end up. I didn't know if it was going to smoke, if it was going to have a bunch of issues with the banging and clanging, and I didn't want to put much money into it. I think I'm somewhere around $400 or $500 in this engine build. And it's been running great for, like I said, the last 4,000 or 5,000 miles since this engine got done. We are going to probably change it in the future. I have hopes of potentially going to a diesel option, whether that be a TDI 1.9 liter from a Volkswagen or maybe an OM617 out of a Mercedes. Or we might just build another stroker motor out of a Jeep engine. I do have a spare on a stand back there that came with the AW4 transmission. So we'll see how I feel about that. For now, we're going to keep running this one and see how it likes to work out. You may be able to see that the wiring isn't finalized. Like I said, I threw this together quickly so I could drive it to the hospital, bring my daughter home. And it's been working since then. And I knew that I would be tearing all of this back out to do this axle swap, so I didn't want to spend too much time on it. We have future plans of cleaning up the wiring, making it look a little bit better, getting the ECU mounted in a little bit better location than where it is currently, and just overall trying to clean up the engine bay. We got to get a wiring system on the electric fan. Right now it's on the old toggle switch. And I would rather it come on with the thermistor. Is that a thermistor? It might just be I think it's a thermistor. But the temperature sensor here that kicks on the fan, it's all plumbed in, I just need to wire it. So that is the engine that we'll be running. There's no plans on changing it anytime soon, but I do want to get it all cleaned up and working a little bit better. I will have to change up some brackets that I changed for running the 258, or not the 258, for running the TF 998 transmission, which is a torque flight. I didn't go over that earlier, probably could have. The TF998 is very similar to a 727 or a 904 to my knowledge. It's just a little bit smaller than the 727 is to fit in this unit. So yeah, that is the brief introduction on the car. I won't go over all the interior stuff, that's kind of boring. I've got seats in it that are NOS seats that I got out of Wisconsin. I made a gauge cluster for it, which I'll probably remake. We're going to be doing just all kinds of work throughout the interior as well. But I think for now, we'll probably go ahead and stop here for this video. I will get the car up on jack stands and ready for tear down for the next video, and we'll begin the process of doing this axle swap. Man, my lips are chapped. Sorry if I'm licking my lips a lot. My lips are chapped. It's getting cold here. And if you can't tell by the overalls I've got on, it's starting to get a little colder out here. So my lips are chapped. That's why I'm sniffling too. But yeah, in this series, we'll be learning together. Like I said, I haven't done much fabrication work. I've never done a 3-link suspension. I've got a pretty good idea on how I want to do it and how I want to do the mounts, which we'll go over when we start to go through this swap. First step will be getting the AW4 transmission in, because we'll be using the mount for that as the mounting point for the lower control arms of the 3-link. That's where we're planning to mount it, unless I change my mind for some reason, but I doubt I will. As I said, this is a unibody car, so unfortunately there aren't that many great locations for mounting things on the chassis. So for now, I think we're going to plan on mounting it there.